your losses quickly and your profits slowly because your objective is not just to be right, but to make a truckload of money when you are right. With that thought, welcome to our Zoom web series hosted by One Tree Hill and PMS Cart on the Juggernauts, conversations with uncommon and curious fund managers. Hi everyone, my name is Jai and I have with me today Arun Mukherjee from SA Investment Advisors. Welcome Arun to our show.
Hi Jai, thanks for having me.
Perfect. I'm assuming you are sort of based out of Calcutta, so everything's well with you and your family.
Well, fortunate to be perfectly fine as of now. What we experienced recently, the so-called typhoon or cyclone, it was scary, man. It was freaking scary.
Okay. What we try and dive into immediately as we start this is what we call a machine gun 15. It's a quick fire round of questions.
Sure.
Let me know the first thing that pops up in your head, and hopefully you will have as much fun as we do.
Sure, please.
Super. Do you think India will see a ratings downgrade?
See, I'm an eternal optimist. Probably I'm neutral at this point of time, but I believe the answer would be yes, because there's a sort of reverse migration happening, and without the levers, the industry can't run or grow.
Sure. Do you think the recent stimulus offered by the government is good, bad, or ugly?
That was quite a jumla. So, we need bad or ugly maybe.
Okay, fair enough. Do you believe in simplicity or diversity?
A mix of both because both helps.
Okay. Do you think the government will be able to get Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi back?
Well, maybe whenever the next vote thing comes, just before that.
Okay, sure. What do you see as the next toil? Is it going to be pharma or is it going to be data?
Well, anyways, data is the latest drug these days.
Do you believe in sort of, passive investing or active investing, or is there like a balance that you would want everyone to be in?
Well, I'm a passive investor, but I'm going to support my companies actively. So the motivation should be aligned. As long as they grow, my wealth would also grow simultaneously.
Okay. Would you sacrifice, what would you sacrifice first? Investment performance or investment principles?
No. I'm going to sacrifice investment performance because if your process is right, sooner or later you are going to get in trouble.
Okay. And if you could go past in the last 6 months or a year, knowing very well what you do now, would you change anything?
Nothing much, because I've been in the market for the last 14 years now. I have had my share of horror, learned a lot. So trying to better up with each passing days. So more or less the process will be simple. But again, I'm much more superior in terms of wisdom than what I was 6 months back.
Okay, that's fantastic. How long do you think India will remain an emerging market?
Well, Corona is presently playing the spoil sport, right? So it would be quite a while because, for the first time in our life or in my investing career, like we are going to see this negative GDP and I'm pretty firm on that. So let's see.
Okay. The most difficult question on the street and maybe the most interesting, are we at the bottom?
Well, it should rather be. Is this like this time is different?
Okay. Is it?
It would always be because, stock market has got an uncanny habit of, ridiculing the majority. It would always be different and it would always humble the guys with so-called most wisdom and all.
Sure. Which balance sheet do you think is the most stretched? The government, the corporate, or the individual?
The government one for sure, because the corporate world over the last 5-6 years, they have deleveraged a lot and we are set to see better days.
Okay. I know you invest in a few startups on your own as well. So from the startup industry, is it boom or bust?
Well, it's per se on it varies on a man-to-man basis or on a to entrepreneur basis. If some agile hustler comes with that fire in belly, and if he has got the vision, and if he again possesses that hunger, he is bound to do well. And I would love to support those guys.
Sure, sure. Over the thing, you already have more than a decade of experience. And if I'd asked you, in your interaction with clients, investors, what is that one mistake that people or investors continue to make across time?
Well, the problem is most of the investors, they are they would always crave for that next multi-bagger or for that next mega bagger, and they would eventually end up buying companies which has got probably debt laden. So that is quite a misnomer. In India, without debt you can't fail, and debt would always ensure that sooner or later you get into the bankruptcy mode. So if you can cut debt from the corporate balance sheet or from yours, you would do a world of good for yourself and for your company.
Sure. And in general, would you sort of double up or double down?
I would double up,
You
especially
double
at this
up.
point of time. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And would you say you are a contrarian or a trend follower?
Well, I am for sure a trend follower, because if you can fathom the next big thing, you are set to make a ton of money. But at the same point of time, there are several ways of making money. If at some point of a time, the time warrants you to be a contrarian, I for sure would be one.
Okay, superb. The last question, one aspect that very few people know about you.
Well, both me and Radhakishan Damani, we both are like first year commerce dropouts.
Okay, superb, superb. Let me push in one more question. How would you rate the research on the street from a scale of 1 to 10?
5.5 to 6 maybe.
Fine.
I mean, it's like corporate governance should always be a taboo, So
Sure.
I'm going to beep me out, but again, I mean, I can't say much more in public domain.
Okay.
Right,
But
sure
great.
thing.
Arun, I think you've come up with flying colors. And, we'll be sending you sort of your coffee with Karan hamper as soon as these lockdowns across multiple cities end. And, we are almost in lockdown, as we are calling it 4.0. Where do you think India as a country is going in terms of easing these restrictions and lockdowns?
Well, I'm going to be a critic in this now. I mean, we imposed the lockdown when we had like probably hundreds in numbers. Like we have surpassed 1.3 lakhs. And
Right.
this is the time that government is, being lenient in terms of opening up the lockdown. I was just going through the flight figures, couple of flights we got landed in Coimbatore and some other places respectively, and they had like COVID patients. And each
Correct.
and every, one from that flight, be it the crew or the passengers, they are sent to quarantine. That is freaking scary. So
Sure.
you would need to adopt something, which could be conducive for both the corporates as well as for the humans. We have got like 14 crore laborers in this country, and they are not earning for the last couple of months. So that is so
Right.
damn scary again.
Okay. So what do you think should be done right now, according to you?
Well, probably some measures, I've been a big fan of what Sweden did. I mean, they kept the minors as well as the seniors, and they ensured that the youths, they went to work and did their stuff. And since India has got a vast young demography, and
Sure.
again, we have got the temperature, we have got the BCG vaccine, as well as probably, these countries, say the Americas or the Western world, they would always lack malaria, right? Because they haven't got any mosquitoes, which we possess. So probably that immunity would only help us.
Right.
This,
Right.
this can't go on and on and on. I mean, for a company like of Maruti size, it did a sales of like zero. And that was like, I mean, something unprecedented, right? Which we couldn't have fathomed earlier.
Correct. Correct. No, I think one of the tweets that I read recently, I think the number of unprecedented events because of this event is itself is sort of unprecedented, right? In terms of every day, every 3 4 days, there's something new which you never thought would happen. Whether it's yields going below zero, oil prices going below zero, etc. is just a different world that we might continue to live in.
See, in that point, I was talking to one of my startup entrepreneurs, which basically sells beverages and snacks. And he
Huh.
did like 2 crores for the month of April. And I was like,
Wow.
bhai, tu to Maruti se zyada sales kar diya.
Sure, sure. Moving on, and you mentioned that you are a college dropout. What prompted you to do that, and what was sort of your first interaction with the stock market?
See, it's again a long story. Parents in our part of the world would always aspire their children to be proficient in English. And in the era of say early 2000, or when I was in like class 7 or class 8, my parents were hell bent on me being proficient in English, and they would lay out the Economic Times paper just for me to learn and speak in proficient English. I was like, yeah, I mean, this is not my cup of tea. I would have been
Sure.
building like castles in air and dreaming, rosy stuff. But again, at one day, I mean, my parents were beside and they said, like, speak out, whatever you have learned. And I was like, okay. I started, glancing through the paper from last to first. And incidentally, all those cumbersome Excel sheets came out, which were basically the stock codes. And I was like, this is the stuff that I was been going through. And they said, this is freaking like, this is bloody stock market. If you do this, we are going to disown you. Somehow the rebel in me that I possess, the nature, got the better out of me. And from there itself, life changed for good.
Excellent, excellent. And sort of talking about your investment advisory that you currently run. A lot of the times you focus on something called the scuttlebutt, right?
Right.
Uh, would you want to say that what is has been your edge, your USP that made you, or people call you the stock market guru in the in the micro caps and the small caps? What has been your edge and your USP? And if sort of you can elaborate more on your techniques and how they've sort of enabled you to achieve this success.
Well, the scuttlebutt primarily has been one important factor because, problem is in India, if you go and approach the management, since they would always be the guys who would own the majority of their shares, their motivations would be aligned. So they would always speak rosy stuff about their companies. They would suck you up onto their rosy gospel tunes. So if you basically approach the lower strata guys, say the ground reality guys, the laborers or the sweepers or the ex-employees, the raw material suppliers, the distributors, they tend to come out with that unbiased gold standard info. And since they haven't got any vested interest, they don't have any idea or interest regarding markets, you tend to snatch or squeeze that info from them. And that goes a long way in making your conviction and thesis robust as far as the small and micro caps are concerned. So that helps you a lot.
Okay, fair enough. And then, obviously, micro caps, small caps in this sort of market get a good amount of beating, right? What is generally your holding period that you come up with in sort of trying to buy into a stock? Saying like, look, this is a stock that I want to hold for at least 6-7 years because that is maybe when the story will play out. Is there an approach related to that?
Well, I am going to stay put as long as the growth story is intact. Since these small caps comes with low basis, they can easily grow at a CAGR of 25%. And if your GDP is growing at say what 5-6%, and if your company is growing at 4x more than that, obviously
Right.
that is going to create a lot of wealth. And with time, what happens is the basis, the small caps becomes mid caps, and the
Sure.
kind of market cap threshold that they attain, the kind of wealth creation that they would make is absolutely amazing. I mean, a single or a couple of them can change life.
Sure, sure. But obviously, that is as you said the sort of the rosy part where one of your micro cap becomes a small cap becomes a mid cap. But obviously, there is a significant amount of risk uh, associated, obviously, with micro caps, right? And obviously, your research then plays a significant part as well. For someone who is, what would you say should be the appetite for someone to start investing in these kind of stocks?
Well, I would like to put it in a different way. It's all about, the kind, if you are understanding the business to the core, I mean, be it a large cap or a small cap, how does it matter? Fine, a volume can be a constraint, but volume or illiquidity is the best friend of a small cap investor. You can be patient and you can be in the acquisition spree mode for a couple of months or for 3 months, and eventually you would end up, having your desired quantity. I mean, small caps in India, again, because of that corporate governance, in spite and irrespective of your smartest of efforts, you would still end up losing on a couple or three of them. But again, this is pseudo venture capital mode, right? Out of a basket of 15, even if like 3, 4 flops, even if like 6, 7 gives you that average kind of a return, and the other moves up, say a 10x or a 20x, you would end up making again a 25% CAGR, which basically you're playing for.
Sure, sure. And if I have to push you a bit more, can you elaborate more on how you land up picking your bets?
Well, I mean, these days, I mean, again, I'm not going to speak about what I did in the yesteryears, but these days, by virtue of being in the market for the last 14 years, I have got one hell of a network. So that a network would consist of, again, dealer, distributors, this and that and whatnot. So since they also tend to be my co-investors, what would end up happening is, they would come up to me and say, Arun bhai, this thing is seeing truckloads of demand, and I'm associated with that. Since, I mean, those guys, they would understand, since it's their niche, that would be
Right,
my starting point. So I would end up, always saving a considerable amount of time in my research. If you actually know that, okay, this is the kind of thing that is going on in these days, you are obviously you are set to make a lot of money. So take the example of a company called Anu Pharma. Now the
sure.
company has been moving over the last couple of days. One of its suppliers called me up and said the erythromycin salts, the core of Anu Pharma's business, has seen quite a spike in the last couple of months or so. So obviously that gives me my age, right? And the company, under the present circumstances, it's going on hitting like 52-week highs.
Right, right, right.
So network matters a lot.
Okay, fair enough. And then do you also, a lot of the investors out there, a lot of the fund managers out there generally buy into or have a good amount of derivation either from, a buffet philosophy or a Graham philosophy or a Charlie Munger philosophy. Do you subscribe to any of those, or you're saying that everyone should come up with their own ideas and figure that path out on their own?
It should be sabka suno khud ka karo any day.
Okay, sure.
Learn from everyone, and then whatever suits you, put that thesis into your arsenal, and only your research or thesis, your process would be much more robust than what it was, right?
Sure, sure. As you mentioned, Arun, this is probably a difficult time for a lot of people because of people are seeing a good amount of bleed, irrespective of whether you're large cap, mid cap, small cap, and across the board, and some even on the debt side, right?
Sure.
How do you sort of control your emotional quotient, even though you feel there's a good amount of conviction in why you've sort of entered a stock?
Well, not only me, anybody who have been in the market over the last 10 years, I mean, he would he would have that jigger to endure this kind of, drawdowns and all. So I'm
Sure.
pretty much habituated in all. I mean, and
Okay.
I'm not emotionally attached to my stocks and all. I do know that if I lose money, I'm going to make up much more. But sooner or later, my process and my companies would start to play out the thesis, and eventually money would get made.
Sure. And so then the follow up and the obvious question to that is, when would you know that your thesis or your philosophy or the reason that you enter a stock is starting to go wrong? Do you wait 6 months, 2 quarters? How do
It's
you know?
again based on numbers. If I'm pretty conservative in my approach, I'm pretty conservative in my numbers calculation. And if my company fails to put up numbers as per my expectation, even being conservative, then obviously I'm going to cut my positions, because India has got an universe of over 6,000 stocks, and there's a lot to play out. There would always be clusters to pounce upon. So I would rather cut my position and move on to something or where the thesis has started playing.
Okay, okay, sure. In your history, I'm sure there have been many times when you've hit upon a great stock and you saw something which the market was trying to avoid or not seeing in a manner that you are. But what has that been one opportunity that that is probably very close to your heart or you'd like to talk about, which you saw at a time when the market was completely ignoring, and you probably went against the tide and made a good amount of money.
Well, there's a company called Kaplan Point, and I'm speaking. I mean, this would be in the era of 2009 or 10. So Kaplan Point promoter had a bit of a shady history. Did something in 2001, fled to Angola, came back, but the company was doing well. And in the year of 2009 and 10, the company was quoting at a market cap of around 14-15 crores, had an operating profit margin of 4%, had its supply chain and distribution. They were debt free. I mean, they were sounding good hints in their annual reports. And at 14 crore market cap, being debt free or having an enterprise value of like 14 crores with sales figure of 60, I felt Kaplan Point was pretty cheap. But I would never knew that Kaplan Point from 10 rupees would move to like 5,500 rupees in a matter of 7-8 years. So the
Sure.
market, I mean, the market never gave its deserved due, right? I mean, fine enough. We would always make mistakes. So the entrepreneur made mistakes. But again, he was efficient, never took any debt, did the expansion through its internal accruals and ended up making truckloads of money. Had the market been much more kind and lenient enough, a lot of the other guys would have made truckloads of money in Kaplan too. And the stock price was
Sure.
always moving up. So if the stock price is moving up, backed up by numbers, and still there's some iota of doubt, I would rather punt on that company, than being circumspect.
Sure. Sure. No, absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. And if I had to take the opposite side of that, and everyone makes their mistakes in their sort of journey. But what has been that one mistake where you've paid yourself a significant tuition fee of sorts and say that yaar maine kya kar diya afterwards, obviously.
Well, it was more on a notional loss spree. I mean, I zeroed into a company called Ajanta Pharma. Again, during the era of 2008, 2009, and 2010. I satisfied myself through every means, made up my mind that I'm going to invest 25% of my capital in that company. And it was at that point of a time, split adjusted bonus was quoting at what, maybe 200 or so. And I was
Sure.
like, okay, this is my company. This is going to change my life. Companies, having a ROE of 20% plus with all the capex behind, and the market, the margins could expand from like single digit teens to 30% plus or so. But again, I had that bias. I was waiting for the company to come back to my price of 200. The stock moved to 250, and I waited for 230. It moved to it moved to 300. I waited for 250, and I was like, "Jando, yaar, I would find something else." And that company moved from 200 to 20,000 in a matter of 6 years. So
Sure.
had I been, a bit more conservative, had I been a bit more probably, adventurous, and if I would have ended up buying Ajanta Pharma a bit more, I mean, at this point of time, I don't really would have been chatting. I would have been in Vegas also enjoying my life.
Sure. Are you trying to say you're not enjoying your life right now?
I mean, again, not to the extent of what Ajanta Pharma would have made, 25% allocation on a, 100 Vagar.
Sure.
Certainly not.
Sure. Sure. So based on that, where do you think is going to be the biggest source of alpha from a risk adjusted basis from their benchmarks? In which
See,
asset class? Obviously, you are definitely an equity
I'm a
person,
100% equities guy. Yeah. See,
right?
equities any
So
day, but yeah, please.
where do you think the alpha is going to be? Maybe even in the equity space, is it going to be related to size? Is it going to be related to a sector? Where are you putting your bets right now?
Well, I'm pretty high on the pharma and APIs. I have been on high. I mean, I've been on high on pharma and APIs over the last couple of years because there are some structural changes happening. I mean, pharma weightage in the index should be around 3.5%, and pharma index itself, I mean, it's still quoting 50% below their, I mean, peak. It has just hit its 10-year median, and companies are severely underowned. But things are happening after this corona thing. The entire world is going to increase its healthcare budget. You have seen this FDI being much more lenient towards the Indian generic companies. So everything is
Sure.
getting added up. So what I foresee is, these finance companies which were severely overowned, smart money is going to sell those and enter into these pharma companies, if not done already.
Got it. Got it. Fair enough. And Arun,
And
we
coming
are
back to
almost.
this,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I would just like to add up a point. Coming back to this alpha point, the problem is we are deprived of great companies. Neither we have a Facebook, neither we have a Google, neither we have a Tencent. We possess nothing, right? So
Sure.
the actual disruption has been seen in the startup arena, and we are severely deprived of that. They are the companies, if you actually see the way that they are scaling up, it's amazing. It's beyond amazing.
Right. 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 And on the point that you made, uh, we're seeing a lot of startups, a lot of avenues where individuals in India, being residents, are now being able to easily, buy into a Facebook or a Tencent or an Apple, etc., through various mechanisms. Do you think that is something that will play up in the coming future?
100%. That is for certain. At least the smart guys, they would venture out to the US. I mean, and they are bound to buy these companies because in India we don't have a technology company. The likes of Infi or Wipro or TCS, these are not technological companies. I'm sorry. These
Reliance?
are Reliance itself could be a technology company. Bajaj Finance is a technology company, but not Infi and not Infi and TCS. They played the lever arbitrage,
Sure.
and these were plain vanilla outsourcing stories, right? Hell,
Right.
you don't even possess a product company.
Sure. Sure. No, I completely agree. And Arun, so we've almost come to the end of this conversation.
Sure.
What I like to end it with is that there are a lot of people like you who started maybe 13, 14, 15 years back, but are now starting right now, and obviously they've seen a good amount of a roller coaster ride. What is that advice that you'd want to give them, so that they hang in there and say that, look, this is the beginning and not the end.
See, they should again go back to the basic. The problem in market is common sense is most uncommon. The guy who works in SBI would give me a call and say, Arun, can I buy stocks of like HDFC Bank? Or say, can I buy stock of like SBI? Right. I mean, they are basically missing the plain simple common sense. So if someone possesses that simple observation power and common sense, to do a world of good. And also the hidden secret would be to do SIP in stocks and not mutual funds. So take the example of Asian Paints.
Sure.
Asian Paints possess 54% market share, right? So it means that out of every two houses being painted, Asian Paint would always paint one. So in the
Sure.
Modi government has got a vision of providing pakka houses to the next 16 crores or 20 crore, Indians, and that presents a massive ballpark figure. So that gives Asian Paints the scalability. It's already a behemoth. So having a market share of 54%, it only means that in the next decade or so, it's going to paint the next 5 or 10 or 15 crore houses. And out of that, there would be always a replacement demand, which would come after every 10 or 15 years. So if you
Sure.
put the amalgamation of two, it remains one heck of a buy even today. You don't need to do any research in these companies.
Sure. So stick to the simple stuff.
Absolutely.
Super, super. It's been great talking to you, Arun. Is there something that you would like to add and tell our audience?
Yeah, I mean, since I'm an eternal optimist and I would always be bullish, the next 20 years would be much, much superior and better than the last 20 years. So if being the responsible Indian citizen, if you can actually invest in equities, you definitely end up helping the nation in its building.
Sure. Superb. Here's wishing you a fantastic 2020 to yourself and your team, Arun. Please stay safe in with whatever things are happening around us, and look forward to our future interactions.
Sure thing. Pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much, Arun.
Welcome. Take care. Bye.